I've seen a lot of very unique game consoles released over the past years. Consoles released in the mid-2000s were the ones that really tried pushing high-definition visuals at minimum. With one exception. Microsoft released the Xbox 360, which was far more powerful and had far more features compared to the original Xbox, including a digital storefront for downloading games, and most games having the ability to output 720p or even 1080p. A year later, Nintendo released the Wii, which was very similar to the GameCube in terms of specifications, but they added motion controls with the Wii Remote. And finally, Sony released the PlayStation 3 on November 11th, 2006. What was supposed to be a massive step up from the PlayStation 2 in terms of features turned into something that almost flopped and sent Sony into financial hell. Well, that is if they didn't have to make several adjustments to reduce cost. Before we dive deep into the console's history, let's take a look at the PS3 console itself. There were two models available at launch, with one system having a 20GB hard drive for $500 and the other having a 60GB hard drive for $600. Oh, and the 20GB model didn't have built-in Wi-Fi for some reason. For comparison, the Xbox 360 released for $300 with no storage, or $400 if you included the 20GB hard drive. To make things even crazier, the Nintendo Wii released for only $250. Just by taking a look at the high price tag, you can very clearly see why the PS3 struggled to gain market share at first. The PS3 Slim came out just a few years later with a lower price tag, improved power efficiency, and produced less fan noise at the cost of removing some features. Taking a look at the PS3, it looks very interesting. Up front is the power and eject buttons, which aren't real buttons, you just tap it like a touchscreen, and the disk drive. There's also either 2 or 4 USB ports depending on the model, and some models even had card readers. This one does not, unfortunately. The disk drive is a Blu-ray drive, unlike the PS2, Xbox, and Xbox 360, which use a DVD drive. The difference between DVD and Blu-ray is DVDs can hold up to 8GB of data, and Blu-rays can hold up to 50GB. This means game developers who wish to develop games that would take more than 8GB can fit all of their data on a single disc, unlike the Xbox 360, which had some games ship on multiple discs. The back of the system has a power input, Ethernet, PlayStation video out, HDMI, and optical audio out. This was also the last system to use the proprietary PlayStation video connector, which Sony was using since the original PlayStation. The left side of the console houses the compartment for the hard drive. These use the SATA interface, which means they can easily be swapped with another drive of higher capacity or even an SSD, which I have in this system. I made a video showing how to upgrade the drive. If you'd like to see that, I'll have it linked in the video description. The top of the console is very round and has the PlayStation 3 logo. If those letters look very familiar to you, you would be correct, because that's the same font used for the Spider-Man movies. Interesting. The controller is mostly unchanged from the PS2. It's got the same design, with the only changes being a new home button, analog triggers, and wireless connectivity. Some early models of the controller did not have a rumble motor. Later models did. The easiest way you can tell whether it supports rumble or not is if it has the DualShock 3 label on the upper side. Mine also does not. On the inside, the PS3 was equipped with the Cell Broadband Engine, which combines a PowerPC chip with 8 co-processors known as Synergistic Processing Elements, clocked at 3.2 GHz. The system shipped with 256 MB of XDR system memory and an additional 256 MB of GDDR3 video memory for a total of 512 MB. For graphics, the system had the NVIDIA RSX clocked at 500 MHz, which was similar to what the Xbox 360 had, except it had its graphics produced by ATI. The console can output resolutions from 480i up to 1080p. Every PS3 game came on a Blu-ray disc. Like I said before, these can hold up to 50GB of data. The PS3 is also capable of playing Blu-ray movies, DVDs, and audio CDs. Early PS3 models are also backwards compatible with PlayStation 2 games. This is because those early systems had real PS2 hardware built in. This included the PS2's Emotion Engine and graphics synthesizer. While it made compatibility nearly perfect, it also contributed to its high cost, and due to the popularity of the PlayStation 2 console itself, this led most PS3 owners to not using the feature at all. In response, Sony released cheaper models without some of the PS2 hardware built in, relying on emulation for the 80GB model. While this approach worked, it also had the consequence of some PlayStation 2 games having issues during gameplay or failing to load entirely. By the time the 40GB and 160GB models released, they were gutted of all PS2 functionality, making it only capable of playing PS3 games and PS1 games, as that's a much easier system to emulate. The console interface was known as the XMB. Here you can load your games and manage save data. You can also load media, including movies, music, and photos off external media, the hard drive, and even network locations like your local file server. The system was a great media machine, with the HDMI output and the optical audio output for surround sound home theater setups. Plus, there's a vast library of games that could be played on the PS3, and even more if your system was a backwards compatible model. So, large game library, media features, they had everything, right? So, what went wrong? Well, a lot of things went wrong. Remember when I said that the PS3 was very expensive at launch? Not only was that high price considered an unjustifiable purchase for many gamers, but the people that actually wanted to get one were literally unable to get one at launch. As it turns out, the day it released, not many units had shipped to the US, and according to CBS News, someone got shot waiting in line for one. Even after the launch, the console went out of stock quickly, and resellers were marking up their consoles for ridiculously high prices, which is not uncommon nowadays. The high sales and short supply wasn't the biggest problem, it was the fact that the system was being sold for a huge loss. Many sources online conclude that the system cost at least $800 to produce while being sold for $500 at minimum. This is also not uncommon today either, as the real profit comes from the games and the subscriptions. During the PS3 era, however, online play was free and a subscription was not required. Combine that with the lackluster launch game lineup, it becomes clear that there wasn't much for Sony to profit from. Another major issue was that the cell processor powering the PS3 was very complex and difficult to develop for. Some early titles like Call of Duty 3 only ran at half the frame rate compared to the Xbox 360 version of the game. 2 years later, in 2008, Grand Theft Auto 4 released. The PS3 version ran at a slightly lower resolution and frame rate compared to the Xbox 360, despite both versions aiming for 30 frames per second. Later on, as the console began to grow more familiar with developers, they figured out how to fully utilize the hardware, and that's why later games ran identical to their Xbox 360 counterparts. The original 20GB and 60GB models are very fragile and are known to overheat under heavy loads. Similar to the original Xbox 360 and its Red Ring of Death, the PS3 suffered a similar technical flaw. In this case, the console may display a yellow light at startup and shut itself off automatically. During the first few years on sale, it did not sell well. Sony had to make several changes in order to become a console leader again. As time went on, manufacturing costs began to decline, and Sony had already experimented with selling the later fat models without PS2 hardware built in, which also reduced the cost of manufacturing. In case anyone's wondering, the PS3 model I have included a 160GB hard drive, and these did not have PS2 hardware support. Although it is still possible to play some PS2 games on unsupported models through the PlayStation Store, as well as by installing a custom firmware, which I did. In 2009, Sony released the PS3 Slim for a new price tag of $299. This addition to the PS3 family featured a major redesign over the original model, ditching the glossy black plastic for a matte black design, and also replacing the Spider-Man font with a newer logo that we still see today. It also shipped with hard drive capacities up to 320GB, and a more efficient CPU and GPU that let the system run quieter. Also, just like every other console redesign, it was much smaller. This drew more sales to the console, making it not as much as a flop as it would have been. This became the preferred console for gamers that play online often, as online play was free through PSN compared to Xbox Live, which required a gold subscription. At the time, it would have been, I believe, $60 a year. In 2010, the Other OS feature, which allowed the console to dual boot the PS3 OS and a special version of Linux, was removed from the console after a software update. Honestly, that sucked because it was very well utilized. For example, in 2010, the US Air Force purchased 1,760 PlayStation 3 consoles to build a mass supercomputer referred to as the Condor Cluster, used for processing radar and satellite imagery. The removal of the Other OS feature brought a lot of backlash towards Sony, and in response, the modding community released a special custom firmware which brought the feature back, which also led to a lawsuit from Sony. One very specific incident happening around the same time the lawsuit was happening, and it's very horrifying. In 2011, the PlayStation Network was hacked and went offline for 24 days. During the breach, details from 77 million accounts have been compromised, which included email addresses, passwords, credit card info, and other things. Because of the legal action Sony had taken against the modding community, this was referred to as an act of hacktivism. Either way, this resulted in Sony losing millions of dollars, and combine that with the money lost from PS3 hardware sales, it was clear that this would not become Sony's most successful console after all. In 2012, Sony released the PS3 Super Slim. It was very similar to the Slim, but much smaller and use cheaper components. Instead of a slot loading Blu-ray drive, there's a sliding drive door on top. It also shipped with hard drive capacities up to 500 gigabytes. In 2013, Grand Theft Auto V released for both the PS3 and Xbox 360, and it went on to become the best-selling game for both of those consoles, bringing in a lot of cash for Rockstar Games, Microsoft, and Sony. You know what else came out in 2013? That's right, the brand new PlayStation 4, and it went on to solve many of the issues Sony had with the PS3. One of them was by utilizing an architecture that was much easier to develop for, which ended up being x86, the same architecture used on Windows gaming PCs. And that system launched for a much more reasonable $400. Another change was that online play now required a PlayStation Plus subscription, which as of today costs $80 annually or $10 per month. And honestly, I think this change is for the better. The game library on the PS3 wasn't bad at all, and considering that the PS4 is not backwards compatible, there's a reason why many gamers still have a PS3 lying around. The Last of Us has some amazing visuals while maintaining a somewhat steady frame rate. This game came out in 2013, which meant developers had several years to learn how to properly utilize the PS3's hardware. There's also the Call of Duty series, with most of those games not having a release on PS4, with the exception of Black Ops 3 and Advanced Warfare. In fact, there's a lot of PS3 games that only appeared on PS3 and maybe Xbox 360 and never got ported to any other PlayStation console. Also, most Sony exclusives from the first and second PlayStation have also seen releases on here. The PS3 is also home to a selection of remastered PS2 games, which run at a higher resolution compared to its original console. Some PS2 games are also sold on the PlayStation Store known as PS2 Classics, and these work on all PS3 models, even the ones that can't play PS2 discs. You know what also works on models regardless of PS2 compatibility? Yup, original PlayStation games. So to basically wrap this up, the console had a very rough start, with the high price tag and extreme development difficulty. As time went on, manufacturing costs began to decline, we saw cheaper models accompanied with some features removed, and developers became more familiar with the hardware, allowing for some excellent games to be developed for the system. Today you can find a PS3 on eBay from $60 to $160 depending on condition, bundled accessories, and hard drive capacity. Also, the PS3 store is still active, so you can still digitally purchase games today. Well, as long as you can add funds through a PS4, PS5, or through a PC. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more videos like this, and I'll see you guys later.